Greetings everyone, this is Game Master Valgern, and this is a first tutorial for the explanation for how to play Wasteland Equestrians. Wasteland Equestrians is a pen and paper role-playing game based on the story of Fallout Equestria, which is a fanfic written by Kkat long time ago, which uses both the setting of the original show, adding the elements of the Fallout franchise from Fallout 1, 2, and 3. In this video, we will learn the basics of how the games works. We'll have how the skill check works, how melee combat works, and how ranged combat works, also known as firearms, and so on. You will notice that Wasteland Equestrians use a sort of hybrid game system because it will use both the D20 and the D100 for percentage results. I decided to use the D20 and the D100 for different reasons. First of all the role-playing game you will see around here about Fallout are using the game system which is present in the game, in the actual video game. So you have something that is quite complex to use because basically role-playing games are stuff for nerds because you have to add the numbers, subtract numbers, and so on. The problem is that Fallout game system is for super nerd because you have an advanced type of calculation which gets quite complicated the more you go on. So this is more simple for a certain point of view, but it's still useful. It's based around my experience of all the role-playing games I have played since I was 10, and since I'm now 32, I have quite a lot of experience. The first thing we will see is how skill check works. Skills allows your character to perform certain tasks, such as searching for loot, jumping over a pit, or perceiving if there is someone hiding somewhere nearby you. For those who already have an experience with role-play game, they already know what it's about. So, skills are divided in two different checks. A check is just used to see if your character is able to perform the action he wants to do. The first type is the irregular skill check or normal skill check. It has a 15% chance to success. So you roll the dice, and if you obtain the result of 15 or less, you succeed. For example, we have our character here, Scrap, which is trying to find something in this pile of junk. So the player will say to the master, okay, I'm looking for ammunitions. Maybe I can find something. The master say, okay, roll search. Search is a skill which allows you to search through something when you are looking for specific items. So he rolled the dice, and he obtains a 29, as you can see here. 29 is less than 15, so he succeeds. If the action he has to do was more hard to perform, for example, yes, he was trying to search for ammo, but he's also trying to not move too much items here and there to make noise, because maybe he pulls out something and all the junks will fall down and make a lot of noise. In this case, the master will say, roll for a hard check for search, or a hard search check. In this case, a hard check only goes with a 20%. So if he rolls again, it'll turn at 19. So it's a success. Depending on your characters, your character could have Modifiers, which allows him to increase the chance to succeed in his skills. For example, you have skill ranks, which represent how good in your skill you are. For example, Scrap has 8 ranks at search, which are increased by 1 because he has a high cunning value. So he adds a +9 to all his skill check. So a normal skill check is 59, a hard skill check is 29. In this case, 29 and 19 are still a success in both occasions. When you succeed in your skill check, you obtain a success. Every 5 success you obtain, you will increase your skill ranks by 1. This means that the more you use a skill, the better you get at it. So every 5 success, you increase 1 rank. When you create your character, you have a certain amount of skill ranks, which you already can assign here and there. For example, he starts with already 5 ranks at search. So his final modifier is 55 because he has 5 ranks plus 1 from cunning, which is 6. So you have 56% for a normal skill check, or 26 for a hard skill check. That's all. It's quite simple, actually. Plus, certain character have access to the cutie mark, which in the show is the talent about things you can do better. In the game, the cutie marks is related to one of your skills. So when you create your character, you have to decide your cutie mark is related to one of the skills available. When the player created Scrap, he decided that his cutie mark was about search, and the cutie mark about search will give him certain advantages over others. The first thing is a cutie mark gives you already 5 ranks in a skill, so you don't have to spend them during character creation. You already start with 5 ranks, plus any other modifier you could obtain. Also, when you perform a skill check, you have also a chance to obtain a remarkable success. A remarkable success allows your character to obtain something more or a little extra from your skill check. For example, he is looking for ammunition. Normally, he would have found, let's say, 4 bullets, right? But maybe he obtains a remarkable success, so the master could say, yes, you find 5 instead of 4. Or maybe you find more information when maybe you are looking for traps and you notice that there are some trap, and maybe you are able to notice that yes, you see there are some traps here, but you also notice that they are mines rather than contraption of some sort, etc., etc. It's up to the game master to say which advantage you get, but it's quite useful. Normally, to obtain a remarkable success, you need a 15 or less for a normal check, or a 5% or less on a hard check. So it's quite hard to actually get a remarkable success. Still, if you have your cutie mark related to a skill, you double such chance. So for a regular check, you have a 30% chance to obtain a remarkable success for a regular check, or a 10% for a hard skill check. For example, as you can see in his first skill check, he obtained a 29 on search. In this case, he will have obtained a remarkable success. So the master will have said, okay, you find more stuff than you were looking for, or he finds something more useful. Maybe he finds 4 bullets and maybe a magazine for your pistol, which is nice. It's still always up to the master. I give quite a freedom for a master to decide what is good for him to add. So that's more or less explains how skill works. You have the basic value and the modifier, which are added together for the total skill check chance you have to succeed. The only thing to remember is if you want to obtain success in a skill, you never count the number between your modifier. For example, if you have 69% of succeed for a skill check, you will never obtain a success if you obtain from 51 to 69. You'll never get a success because the modifier basically means is something that you have already learned. For example, I already know how to do that, so the modifier will never give you a success. You will always have to obtain 15 or less or 20 or less if you want a success. Remarkable successes instead will give you 2 success because you have learned something more important than usual. So for recapping, normal skill check requires a 15 or less. Hard skill check require a 20 or less. Modifier adds the number to your chance to obtain a success in the skill check, obviously. Success allows you to increase your skill ranks. And remarkable successes allows you to obtain double the successes and to have something extra from the master. Another thing to take in consideration is not obligatory, but it's just for the game master, is when someone fails a skill check, but within few points. For example, uh, I need to jump over a pit, okay, and my chance to do so is 16%. Let's say that, or 65. Okay, the player rolls and he obtains a 68, which is just 3 points away from the success, which is quite kind of lame sometimes. So the master could say, okay, you jump over the pit, but you don't land safely over, but you basically reach the edge of the pit and you barely manage to grab it. So you can say, okay, you partially succeed in something rather than yes, it is a success, or no, you just fall down. This is a thing. It is not necessary, but you can do that if you want. Also, there is no critical failure unless the situation says so. For example, if you are trying to disarm a bomb, there is a high chance that if you mess something up, the bomb will explode in your face. So in this case, if you are trying to defuse the bomb and you obtain a very high result, like 99, the master could say, okay, the bomb just blows off your face, for example. In other occasion, if it's like, okay, I'm trying to look for a book and you fail, there is no critical failure. It's just, okay, you don't find the book. It's not like, you cannot find the book and you fall inside a black hole, for example. But that's all. Okay. Now we are talking about combat, which is usually the most enjoyable thing many people have in a role-play game. It is a role-play game, but yes, people love to shoot at each other. Anyway, combat is used when talking fails or when people just want to get violent with each other. How combat works. First of all the creatures present in combat must have to roll for initiative. Initiative is simply to determine when someone acts before the others. So in this case, we have Beatrice and a regular rider, which is they are trying to fight each other. So the player rolls for his character, in this case Beatrice, and then the masters rolls for the raider. When rolling for initiative for opponents, there are 2 ways a game master could handle the situation. Let's say, for example, that we have 2 raiders instead of 1, as a simple example. Usually, if you want to make the things go quickly, you simply roll initiative for only one of the raider and use the initiative for all of them. In this case, you roll the 15 and all your raiders move at the same time. The other version is instead to roll for all the creatures to have different initiative. For example, we have two raiders and the master wants to roll for both of them. So we have a 15 and a 19. As you can see, we have Beatrice, the first raider, and then the second one. This could be used to make things more interesting, because if the enemy always move at the same time, the players can organize them better. So, okay, I move here, you move there, and then the opponents will act at once. If you have different initiative roles, it makes things more complicated. But it's usually a good type of complication, because players will be always be careful when they move, because maybe they want to expose themselves and then the opponent reacts and then they fire, etc., etc. So it's up to the game master to decide. You can do both. You can simply say, okay, this is a simple encounter, I roll only a single initiative, or now this is an important encounter, so I roll initiative for each of one of the participants. If you have different type of creatures, you should always try to have at least an initiative roll of every different creature. For example, if you have a raider and a ghoul, you will roll for the ghoul and the raider separately, because they are not the same creature. If you have the same type of creature, for example, 5 raiders, just because you want a quick encounter, you can still just roll one initiative roll and then start fighting. So we have the two results. Beatrice obtained at 19, the raider obtained at 15. Beatrice will start the round acting first, and then the raider will act in his turn. Every creature in his round is able to perform up to 2 actions: moving, attacking with something, attacking with a melee weapon, firing a gun, or doing something else. You can usually only perform one action per type of action. You can move only once, you can attack only once, unless the specific action allows you to perform twice such action. So in this case, we'll simply cover the basics of combat. So we have roll initiative, and now is the turn of Beatrice. Beatrice will move. You measure movement in meters or feet, depends where you're living. Every medium-sized creature moves up to 9 meters or 13 feet. So she simply decides to move up close to the raider, trying to beat him up. So 6 meters. This is count as an action. Moving is counts as an action. So Beatrice now has another action free. So before we start attacking each other, there is an important thing to talk about, which is hit points. Hit points represents how many hits character or creature could suffer before going down. In this case, as you can see, Beatrice has 19 hit points and the raider only 13. Every time you suffer damage, you reduce your total hit points from such amount. For example, if you suffer 5 damage, you remove 5 hit points from your total. If you reach 0 hit point, the character will simply be considered knocked out. So he falls unconscious, or he's KO. If the amount of damage will send you lower than 0, like for example, -2, -3, your character will start to die. Is considering bleed out state. You have a certain amount of time before your character actually dies once and for all. Usually is about, you have a number of negative hit points equal to your constitution. So if your constitution is 14, if you reach -14 hit points, you then die. You can still be healed while in bleed out state, but any damage suffered could easily kill you off, depending on the amount of damage. When dealing damage to opponents, creatures, monster, or whatever, for simplified things, when they reach 0 each point, they are considered dead, no matter what. because it's not really important that they could survive or less, unless the game master decides so. For example, you are fighting a specific character that you want to knock off, but you don't have to kill. He will keep trace of his total hit point even when they go to a negative value. For others, it doesn't matter. They reach 0 hit point, they are dead. Fine as. When all your action have been done, your turn ends and your opponent's turn starts. In this case, she's have moved, and then she decides to attack with her hooves. To attack, you roll a d20 and you add your combat modifier. In this case, she has a +6, so we roll for her. And she obtains a 17, which is 11 plus 6. You also see an additional number of 49 that will be explained later. To defend from an attack, you have two choices: trying to dodge or trying to parry the attack. You can only parry an attack if you have something to use to defend yourself. In this case, the rider will simply try to dodge the incoming attack. Attacking, dodging, and parrying more or less uses the same concept. You roll a d20, add your modifier, and the one which has obtained the higher result wins. In this case, the raider has to obtain a 17 or more. So let's see what will he get. He tries to dodge and obtain a 20. As you can see, 15 plus 5. So basically, Beatrice tried to hit him, but he managed to dodge. Every time you have to fight something, you have to roll a d20 and add your modifier. And the defender do the same. The one who gets the higher result wins. If you obtain a tie, I mean, if Beatrice obtained a 17 and also the raider obtained a 17, you have to consider that the defender always wins, which means every time you are suffering an attack or something else, when someone is trying to actively doing something against you, you obtain a tie, you are considered the defender, so you will always win. There are some feats or special events which allows you to win even if you are the attacker. But in this case, just to simplify things, every time you get a tie, defender wins. So now that Beatrice has done all his attacks and movement, is the raider turn. The raider will simply use the same concept. He will try to respond to the offense with another hoof. So we will roll. And he rolls a 9. And Beatrice obtains a 10. So far, so good. Let's pretend for a second that in the next turn, Beatrice managed to actually hit the raider. What will happen? First thing, you have to check if you have scored a critical hit, which is the number as you can see here. Critical hit uses the 100 dice, so you have a chance to obtain a critical hit. A critical hit is simply indicates that your hit was powerful or you have managed to strike a weak spot or something. In this case, you always have to check first if you obtained a critical hit and then roll for damage. Let's say so far she didn't obtain any critical hit. Let's stay with the basic. So now she rolls her damage. The damage she inflicts to the raider is 1d3 plus 6. Wow. So if she obtains a 7, total of 7 damage. The only way to reduce such damage is to wear an armor. In this case, the raider has a raider armor, which grants him a damage reduction. A damage reduction, as the name saying, reduce the damage you suffer by a specified amount. For example, he has a damage reduction of 3, which means every time he suffers damage, he reduces 3 of such damage. If the total damage you reduce goes to 0, you're fine. In this case, she deals 7 damage, minus 3, for a total of 4 damage dealt to the raider. That's it. That is mostly the basics of how combat. When you score a critical hit, you don't deal additional damage, but you can deal a specific effect depending on which type of damage you deal. For example, bludgeoning damage will have a chance to stun the opponent. So let's say Beatrice obtained a critical hit against the raider. If she managed to actually deal damage, the raider is then forced to perform a shock test to resist or become stunned. But we will see that in the advanced rules. For now, this is are the simple basic of how combat works. You roll your attacks, the opponent tries to defend. If you win, you roll for damage and subtract the damage reduction. That's all. Now we will cover rules for using ranged attacks and firearms. Firearms and ranged attacks follows more or less the same rules of a regular attack, with exception that you can attack from distance, which is a quite advantage, especially in a post-apocalyptic world. In this scenario, we have Rabidusk, which is a paramedic unicorn, and a couple of raiders, which are trying to kill her. Rabi is equipped with a pistol, while the unicorn raider is equipped with a shotgun. The other are unarmed. The first thing we have to see here when firing, you have to take in consideration 2 factors. First factor is line of sight. Line of sight means what your character can actually see. Since obstacle and other creatures can block your line of sight. For example, she clearly see the unicorn raider. She more or less see the raider behind, but she's unable to see the red raider in the room. So she can only open fire upon creatures she can see. In this case, the female unicorn mare. The second thing you have to consider is the ranged line. A ranged line is an imaginary line where the attack should go. For example, when you shoot in a certain direction. So the bullet is supposed to travel in this line. Okay, this is important because if that first target is able to dodge the attack, but there is someone behind, the creature behind is considered to be the new target because the bullet doesn't simply fall off if you miss. It goes simply hit someone behind. In this case, we simply try to open fire on the raiders. So Ruby opens fire and she obtains a 19, and the raider tries to dodge. In this case, the rider unicorn will suffer a glancing hit because if you are within a certain range from the firing weapon, you need to obtain 5 or more points higher than your attacker. So if she obtains a 19, you actually have to obtain a 24 to dodge completely the attack. If you obtain the same result or up to 5 points, instead of being hit, you suffer a glancing hit. Glancing hit will only deal you half damage and will never deal you a critical hit. Since this is a glancing hit, the pistol used by Ruby should deal 8 damage, which is half to 4. These 4 damage are still also reduced again by the damage reduction to 2. Luckily, the pistol used by Ruby has a value called armor piercing. Armor piercing means that it ignores a part of your damage reduction according to the number. The pistol she's using has an armor pierce of 1, which means that the damage reduction you have is lowered by 1. In this case, the raider has a damage reduction of 2, which is reduced to 1. So in the end, the raider suffers 3 damage because 8 were original, or the, the original damage was 8, halved to 4, and reduced to 3 by the damage reduction of 1. So she suffers 3 damage. If by any chance the raider was able to actually dodge completely the attack roll, let's say Ruby obtained a 10 and she obtained a 19, the raider behind would have considered the next target. In this case, the raider should have also dodged the attack. So let's say Ruby obtained a 10, he has to dodge a 10 or more. 17, so he's able to also dodge the attack. When performing any type of attack, both melee or ranged, if the target is unaware of the incoming attack, for example, she's neck up behind him and he have no idea what's going on, you will always be able to hit the target without any dodge roll, unless you are firing from a certain distance, because yes, he is unaware, but you can still miss him for some reason. But in melee, if you are in melee and he is unaware of the incoming attack, you will automatically hit him, no matter what. In this section, we will talk about flesh wound and how to use your pip buck. Flesh wound are a status condition that your character could suffer during the games, which will hinder his abilities and his performance. A flesh wound will reduce your total hit points and will inflict you penalties for certain actions, such as a shock test and skill checks. Or even worse, you can have also penalties to hit, to dodge, and so on. The more serious the wound, the worse it gets. The first tier of wounds is the flesh wound. It is but a scratch. A flesh wound simply reduces your hit points by 1 or 2 and will inflict you just few lower penalties, just -1%, 2%, nothing important. But the more flesh wound you get, the more such penalties will sum up. So if you have only a single flesh wound, everything is fine. If you have 3 flesh wounds, instead of a -1%, you could have a -6%. So they start to take a toll on your character. A character can only have up to 3 flesh wounds, 2 serious wounds, and 1 mortal wound. If you reach 2 mortal wounds, he will always die, no matter what. You can all, despite your total HP, the character will die. Healing from such wounds, it takes more time than recovering regular HPs. So you always have to be careful about where you go, what you do, and if you are able to recover from the flesh wound, because they will stay until cured. Because you can, let's say that you have a potion that allows you to recover all your 8 points, that's fine. But if you have suffered a flesh wound, that will stay there until cured properly. Luckily, this character named Klinkebolt, which has suffered a flesh wound, as you can see, he has 13 hit points instead of 15 because he has suffered a flesh wound to the chest. He's also equipped with a pip buck. A pip buck is an instrument that grants you certain advantages, mostly used by unicorn, but is also used by other races, usually other equestrian races. There are 2 types of pip buck, the civilian version and the military version. The civilian version has the classic use, like you can listen to the radio, you can check your inventory, and it also allows you to have access to the EFS, the Eyes Forward Sparker, which is a sort of radar or minimap with a very basically. EFS allows you to detect creatures within 15 meters. But the problem is they are simply displayed on the pipbuck as within a certain range. Well, it doesn't show that if they are on the last floor of a building, or if they are underground, or if you are in the same level as you are. You will only know that there is people around. In this case, as you can see, there are two raiders hidden behind the building, and Clinky is unable to see them, so he is unaware of their presence. Still, if Clinky would use his EFS, you will automatically see that there are two creatures within 9 meters and 12 meters. So even if they are hidden from his side, he is still able to detect them through the EFS. The other functionality a military pipbuck has is the access to the SETS, the Stable Tech Targeting System. The SETS allows the user to improve his aim. By spending a certain amount of magic points, you obtain certain benefits. If you spend 1 magic points, you will obtain a +1 for the first shot you fire. But that's all. So if you fire 10 rounds, only the first will obtain a +1. Or you can spend 5 MP or magic point. You can spend 5 magic points to obtain a +1 for the first 5 firing action you perform. This is basically a huge difference how the stats is described in the book and how it should be in reality. It's different from Kkat work because in the opera, how is described as stats work, it's like it stops time and you can do whatever you want within such period of time, which is wrong, because in the original games you had the ability to stop or pause the game and decide where to shoot, like select head, chest, limbs, etc., and then press enter. So basically is not really something which stops time. It simply helps you aim better. But in a video game, it was simply executed like that. So in Wasteland Equestrian, it doesn't stop time. It simply aids your aim. That's all. So this basically ends our first tutorial about how Wasteland Equestrian works. It's quite brutal because characters don't have much hit points, weapons deals a lot of damage, and flesh wounds, serious wounds, and mortal wounds can really mess your character up, especially if you get shot in the face. So my suggestion when playing Wasteland Equestrian is to be careful. The point of the game is not to have unstoppable heroes which are able to gun down everything they met, like in the original story, but tries to make more sense in a post-apocalyptic world where every fight you have to face is potentially dangerous or easy, depending how you move. If you ambush someone, you will probably destroy him unless he's quite armored or he reacts good and you roll badly. So there is always this sense of danger, which is basically how actual post-apocalyptic worlds should work. For fantasy and other type of game, you can have heroes which are actually like heroes. So they have more hit points, they have more odds in their favor. But in this game, I wanted to give something more hardcore. Let's say hardcore. So far, in all the testing game we had, nobody managed to die, but most of the time they were get really close to dying, especially for a bad roll, for a couple of bad decisions, especially Clinky. Here was always almost with at half his hit points or less. So remember, be clever and hit hard. This is Game Master Vergan for the first tutorial for Wasteland Equestrian saying good night and good fight.